Okay, audio is working. Let's get this going. Hey, what's up, guys? My name's DrWeez, and well, this is a very quick guide to XTU on non-K processors. So I get the question quite a bit on the private messaging. How do and let's just go through some of the basics in Windows, and I'll transition that across quickly as well. Right, so with Windows, or that actually really hurts. .70 platform makes a major difference with XTU. So make sure that you've got the right memory configuration and that you've got the right memory settings. There again, I really stress, try different settings, test, change, test, change, test, change. And those are the basics for non-K XTU overclocking. And let's go through some of the XTU settings that are also very helpful. For non-K, it's not it doesn't have such a great impact, but definitely for when you're overclocking K processors on air, you need to sort of get an understanding of the power delivery and of the throttling. So by default, this is the benchmarking screen on XTU, and by default, you've got some information here on the bottom right-hand side. And the important thing to always go in and tick extra, especially if you're overclocking on an all-in-one cooler or water cooling or something to that effect, is your thermal throttling. Your power limit throttling is very important, and then there's one other throttling, your current limit throttling. Right. So go in and enable those three extra indicators, and when you start hitting sort of maximums, it will be lit up in orange and yellow, and it will be as clear as daylight, and you can go and address some of those issues. For instance, your current limit throttling, if you don't go into the power delivery of the motherboard and change the settings there, you will hit your current limit throttling when you start to push the limits on the voltages, and that will, when it throttles, it will hurt your score. So make sure that you have those enabled so you can see when it happens, and then you can account for it at the same time. I'll go through that. I'll do one of these as well with a K processor where we can actually hit those throttling limits, and I'll be able to show you what happens there. Okay, how's it? Yeah, so we've got some questions in the chat there. I have not the sound all the time. Is it just me? To be perfectly honest, I don't know if it is just you or not. I'll have to check the recording. George Storm, thanks for tuning in. How's the sound on your side? Okay, so let's just go back to where we were. All right, so we're hitting some drop frames, but the sound should be coming through all right. Okay, so it looks like there's a little bit of throughput issues. Yeah, it looks all right though. All right, so let's move on. Okay, so where was I? Right, so we just basically went through the basic configurations of XTU. Let's go ahead just for interest sake and run a benchmark just to get a baseline score. So the configuration, everything's at stock. I haven't set any timings. I haven't set anything to that effect on the memory or on the processor. Everything is stock standard. We should get a score, I'm guessing around maybe 800 at stock. And then we'll go ahead and change some of the settings and take it from there and see how we do. All right, so 984. Okay, and then our maximum core frequency went up to 3.5. All right. Okay, so let's reboot and let's get into the BIOS, and we can go through the basics in there for non-K overclocking. Okay. Like I said, everything in the BIOS was stock. Okay, sorry, I had set that to manual. So we can have a look. Everything is set to auto. Now, for non-K overclocking, it's very important not to push your base clock in the BIOS past the cutoff point for the AVX instructions, because XTU really needs those instructions. So What is safe in the BIOS is probably about 102 for the ASUS boards. You could really boot around there. So the first thing we'll do is we will go and set our base clock frequency to 102, and we'll set a maximum core ratio of 36. The DRAM frequency, everything else there we're going to leave absolutely stock. We don't need to change anything there at the moment. The DigiPower, I like to go and set everything to what you would do, the maximum what you feel comfortable with on air. So this should all really be fine. Internal CPU power management, I leave everything there at stock. Tweakers Paradise, again, there's nothing that needs to be changed in here. The last thing that we do need to change is just set the SVID support to disabled. Alright, so that's always a must for when you're doing any sort of overclocking. I always recommend disabling that. And the cache ratio, we just put to 36 as well. And I'll set a power limit of that. Okay, so the voltages can all stay at stock because we're really not pushing the processor up a hell of a lot. If we find that we are unstable, then you can maybe play with a little bit of core voltage, but it really shouldn't be necessary for the thresholds that we're working at for non-K overclocking. So the method we use here now is we will test the overclock by running XTU once. Once we've run XTU, then we'll open up TurboV and we'll increase the base clock a couple of steps, small steps at a time, until we actually crash. And that would be our maximum base clock we could run in Windows. But as always, the first thing to do is just to run a quick test and make sure that you are stable with what you've configured in the BIOS. Alright, so while we've got that running, the things to look at on the screen, what I call the important things is your max core frequency and your processor cache frequency. So the max core frequency can vary, but what you're wanting to look at is to where is it topping out at. So you really should be seeing it at around 3.6 with the base clock we set. So just monitor that to see if you are getting there. And then your package temperature is also quite an important one to keep an eye on. If it does start hitting very high temperatures, you could be having some thermal paste issues. Really, at the voltages we set, we should never be seeing more than 60 degrees at the very most, as long as your cooling is up to scratch. Let me just go and pause here. Just to remind everybody that if you are watching this on Facebook, unfortunately I can only monitor the chat on Twitch. So if you have any questions, please drop by my Twitch channel and feel free to ask any questions there. Alright, so what we can see from the first run here is our maximum processor frequency, 3.64. So that's perfect. It has actually run at the maximum frequency we set at the BIOS. And we've also got an indication that it did run at a faster speed because the score was increased. So we're going to put you at 102, and then our score was 1002, and then max core 3.64. All right, let me save that. Now what I want to do is do the task of finding out where my maximum base clock is that I can set in Windows before it crashes, which means before it actually goes into the non-K overclock threshold, and then we can see what memory we can run from there. So at 102, let's go 102, 225, apply it. All right, that's still, the mouse is still working, so stable. Let's go to 500, apply that. Okay, that's still good. Let's try 600, apply that. All right, 700, apply that. And at some point here now, it should freeze on us, and then we know that one step back from that is basically our maximum. So let's try 800. Okay, so there 800. We've actually crashed. We haven't frozen. Now, I wonder if this behavior is different on the ASUS ROG board. What it will actually do, just Windows will just freeze. Windows won't crash. So that could be related to a voltage. So what we'll do is we'll set it now in the BIOS and boot at the 0.25, 0.25, and then do the same task again. Right. So that also could have been. It also could have been maybe a memory timing, memory voltage blue screen that we encountered there. So let's just boot at this and see where we go. We have to run XTU at the start because we have to make sure that at 102.5 we are stable before we start increasing the clocks. So I hope this is all making sense so far for everyone. If not, please feel free to drop a message if you're watching this on YouTube on the replay. Please feel free to drop me a PM or a DM or whatever you call them on YouTube, and I'll be happy to answer any questions or clear up anything that's unclear at the moment. The idea is I'd like everyone to fully understand how to take advantage of the XTU application for upcoming events. There are a few South African events coming up which this knowledge should be helpful for. And then obviously for the Rookie Rumbles, this is always great to have a little bit of a foundation to move on if you are a rookie, to understand how some of the guys are getting the scores that you just can't seem to figure out. Okay, so quickly running through this, our processor cache frequency is now 3.69, so that I think is higher, if I'm not mistaken, than what it was before. Everything else looks pretty normal. Package temperatures hovering around 45, 49, and there's no throttling going on just yet. And I don't expect to see any throttling with the non-K overclocking. You're really just not pushing the limits far enough to hit any of those power throttles or thermal throttles. Okay, so we've got another improvement on the score, and we just make a note of it. So 102.5, and this is 1018, and max core is 3.65. Okay, so what I want to do again is turbo V core, and we know 600 didn't crash the last time we crashed when we said 800, so we'll just jump straight to 700. Okay, that seems to be fine. Let's try 750. Okay, there we go. So I think 700 looks to be possibly our maximum that we can set. So the base clock jump really is quite big, and we aren't able to get very close to 103, unfortunately, like we are on the other boards. So once you've discovered your maximum base clock that you can run at, the next huge advantage is your memory overclock. Now, I'm using the HyperX Sherry 2666 C15 DIMMs. These have got a AFR based IC. Now the real advantage comes in is when you're running close to 3800 C12 or 2000 C12. These AFRs will not do such a high frequency, but we should still be able to get a boost. The important things that you're wanting to take care of for XTU is your T4, so your 4 active window. That needs to be as low as possible, and your TR-EFI needs to be as high as possible. That gives you a boost as well, and then obviously your megahertz. So we're going to go ahead and try and push this memory. I think I might be able to get 3466 out of it. So first thing we'll do is we'll run XMP, and we'll see if XMP gives us any sort of a boost. And 90% of the time, if you have been running your memory at stock, setting XMP will give you quite a nice boost in score. If XMP doesn't give you a good boost in score, then what I suggest you do is we go through the preset profiles, which are pre-programmed into the BIOS that you can take advantage of. Right, so we'll go and set one at 2.5. We set XMP. The only thing we might want to do, okay, DRAM voltage is set at 1.2. We might just set that at 1.3 and just be done with that. And we can then reboot and see how that works out for us. Excuse me. Alright, so we've set XMP. Let's run a quick XTU and see how that's looking. Okay, so setting XTU actually hurt our score by 1 point. Just make a note of that. I mean, setting XMP. So we can go down here and we can now say XMP, and this was 102.5. 102.5 didn't save here earlier, and that was 1018. Okay, right. And we're going to say 1017, and here 3.64 was the maximum. Okay, so let's go and increase the memory clock. Okay, so now there are two ways we can do this. We can go and do it the just by increasing the DRAM frequency and leaving the DRAM timing alone. So just leave these as they are, and then it will set the autos. The other way we can do that is by increasing the frequency and then using the presets. So there are a lot of presets here. You just need to know what memory IC you're using. So we're using a HyperX single-sided 4 gig, so 2x4 gig HyperX single-sided, and they are the AFR base, so we could use that preset, which is a 3.6 clock. We'll come and try that just now, but I think first of all we'll try and increase the megahertz, leaving everything else at XMP and seeing where that takes. Alright, so the memory trained at those timings, and we're booting into Windows. Okay, so there you can see the very dramatic increase in the XTU score, really, and the only thing we changed was the memory overclock. So we changed it to here is 3000 memory, and we increased the score to 1046, and that's really quite a nice jump. And you'll also notice that our maximum processor frequency was 3.57. So if we had to get the extra 100 megahertz in the processor, we could even increase that score even further. So now that gives you a clear indication of really where it scales and how nicely it can scale just by changing a few of the settings, and memory being on the non-K overclocking, memory being your biggest ally along with base clock. So there are certain boards that can get slightly higher in the base clock, and you'll find that those are all the boards that are getting the scores. But it doesn't mean to say you cannot be competitive with a non-K, I mean, you know, with these boards that can't reach those scores. You just got to really be feisty with your memory timings and your memory settings. The last thing I want to go ahead and try is the preset, and to see where that takes us. So we're going to DRAM timing control, memory preset, and we've got 2x4 gig HyperX single-sided, and I want to load the AFR presets. I'm hoping that this memory will run that. I can't remember if it will. So there you can see the timings that it's set, and it should have also set DRAM voltage, which it has not, so 1.85, and that should be fine. Let's go ahead and see if that trains and see what sort of score we can get with that. Good evening, Troutman. Thank you for joining. How are you doing? Right, so we're busy posting. And AE, it looks like we should have trained. Yep, we're good to go. So I might not have set the DDR timing, the DDR frequency. So let's just have a look at that quickly. So yeah, still set at 3000. So we're just going to change the frequency up to 3600. Right, so I forgot to come and change this here. So we'll start off at a modest 3400. Right, so let's go ahead and see what sort of score we can get with that. And then, you know, those presets really are a great foundation to work from. If your memory trains them, trim them down, trim them up, move the frequencies up, move the frequencies down, and really just get a feel for what you can, where you're getting the best benefit out of the memory. So this will be the last score that I'm going to do for this XTU guard on the Maximus Gene with the HyperX Fury. Next time on Thursday, I'm going to come back and I'm going to use a 6700K processor. So the rules change slightly. We'll be limited there by heat and by the type of cooling that we can apply. And then I'll also more than likely be using a different RC on the memory chip, so we can go through some of the different type of presets and settings that are beneficial to XTU for the air type overclocking. Right, so there you can see our final score with the memory clocks just been pushed up and some timings been changed of 1085. That is approximately 30 or 40 points behind the current best scores on HWBot. So now we just changed the memory to, I think, the 3400. And our score was 1085. Good idea of what is good and what is not good, and how to just improve those scores using the hardware demonstrated. So I'm going to go ahead and sign off and say thanks for tuning in, everyone. I'll be back on Thursday with another guide on XTU, giving you guys some tools, making sure